Welcome back to ThinkTech. I'm Jay Fidell, and today we're going to talk about agriculture. We're going to talk about research in agriculture in Manoa. We're going to talk about the Thrive Hawaii Agrifood Summit with Jim Wyban, who's a principal member of that brand new summit partnership organization. Okay? Right after this. Good morning, Jim. Thank you for coming on the show.
Hi, Jay. Thanks for having me.
So this is very important, and I'll tell you why I think it's very important. Is that we import 90% of our food. I could be wrong by 5% on that, and we need all the help we can get to try to establish an agricultural food industry. And kudos to you for seeing that and for organizing a program that's in affiliation with a similar organization on the mainland to create a summit in September of this year, which will bring us closer to that goal. I wish you could do it sooner. I wish you could do it tomorrow, Jim.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell us about your work in agriculture, aquaculture, and food in general, and how it relates to this new Thrive program.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Well, going back a little bit about what my qualifications are, the big deal in my career was I developed the world's first SPF shrimp as a research scientist, and then I quit my research scientist job and started my own company to commercialize that technology. And it turned out it was quite disruptive in that we literally reinvented the way shrimp are farmed around the world. We did business in 26 countries, and we created literally a $30 million per year export market for new Hawaii businesses. Those were the SPF shrimp exports. And it resulted in a 6x increase in global production. So I did that for about 20 years.
Well, let's have a moment of nostalgia on that. That's the broodstock shrimp. And
correct.
I remember that was done under the auspices of HPU at Mackay Range. And Brian Goldstein, who was on the show a number of times, was involved in that project, as I remember. And as I remember, Hawaii and HPU was selling the broodstock shrimp mostly to Thailand, so that the Thai farmers could grow a lot of shrimp. But my knowledge is like 10 or 15 years old. So update us how you got from Thailand and the broodstock shrimp off Mackay Range to where you are now.
Yeah, well, actually, we were based at the Natural Energy Lab in Kona, which is still the home of SPF shrimp. And actually, the SPF shrimp were first developed in Kona, Hawaii. And as I said, we've total export from Hawaii now, SPF shrimp broodstock is somewhere around $300 million cumulative sales since we started that industry, not Brian Goldstein, sorry. He was on the fringe, very much on the fringe, but a great salesman. So there you go. So anyways, we did that for 20 years over in Kona and ended up having a nice exit to the largest shrimp farming company in the world, CP. And after a couple of years of what I call recreational retirement, where I traveled a lot, my wife and I traveled a lot, played a lot of golf, afternoon beers, all that good stuff.
Is this because you made a ton of money on the shrimp?
I don't know about a ton. I never weighed it, but I didn't have to work.
Okay, good.
So anyways, after a couple of years of that, having a recreational retirement, I was unfulfilled. I said, yeah, I had done something great, but what am I doing today? And so we started to work. Hawaii has been very good to me. I've been here for over 40 years. And, I built this business and it was really good to me. So I thought, well, what could I do to give back to my community? Well, what I know best is entrepreneurship. I'm an entrepreneur in my heart and soul. So I started a nonprofit called HIplan, which was essentially an entrepreneur support organization to encourage, discover, and develop the entrepreneurs of Hawaii Island, the Big Island, where I live. And we started that about 7 years ago. And the first phase of HIplan was we did annual business plan competitions where we recruited a bunch of entrepreneurs. They had to submit a written business plan to get into it. And
are these food entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs?
These are all they had to. The only requirement is they had to be Big Island based for that competition.
Okay.
And we put them through a process so they actually learned a lot about writing a business plan and then how to communicate it. And we put them through a three-phase competition. And then in the end, it was sort of like Shark Tank, where they came in front of a set of judges and gave their presentation and got scored. And ultimately, the winner of that competition got a $25,000 cash prize from us. And it was great. We did that for 5 years. We worked with about 200 companies, gave away over $200,000 in prizes, and it was very successful. And then COVID came in, and the idea of getting together in groups and stuff like that just wasn't really viable. We did a bunch of stuff on Zoom, but it just wasn't the same thing. So as we are sitting around inside COVID, thinking of what really is needed, Jason, my stepson and partner in this, had been, he was a human nutrition major in college, and he had been talking to me extensively about food and food production and what's Hawaii going to do. And he came up with this idea we should have a conference on ag tech. And at first I was resistant to it, but it turns out, he convinced me that what we did with SPF shrimp broodstock was actually ag tech. It was aquatech, maybe you would call it. But anyways, it had all the elements of a viable ag tech business. And so, once that enlightenment came through, okay, we can do this. So last June of 2022, we organized a conference called Tropical AgTech Conference, which was we convened the conference over at Hilo, and we got about 250 people. About 200 people came in person, and about 50 people watched it virtually, online, live.
Who were the people who came?
Well, it's a mix of folks. It was policymakers, landowners, investors, research scientists, researchers. The one disappointment of that was there weren't many farmers. And it turns out, as we've explored this more deeply, the cohort of existing farmers in Hawaii, their average age is like mid-60s, and they still farm the way they've farmed for the last 30 years. And unfortunately, we think that the introduction of technology into agriculture is really the way forward, because the fundamental problem in Hawaii agriculture today is the farmers aren't making any money. And that's just unacceptable. So the farmers' kids don't want to be in farming. The farmers are growing old and retiring. Their average income is very poor.
Well, this reminds me of Richard Ha, whose slogan, Richard Ha and Hamakua Farms, whose slogan is, if the farmer makes money, the farmer will farm. Of course, the flip side is if the farmer doesn't make money, the farmer will not farm. And it's been that way, been that problem, for decades, I think.
For decades.
And the problem about people getting older is they're still getting older even as we speak.
Yes.
The young people are not coming into it. And I agree with you 100,000%, is that if you can entice them with modern technology that will help them farm on an automated basis, leveraged basis, you might interest them to come in and do farming. And that would be the solution to everything, wouldn't it?
They want to use this. They want to farm with an iPhone. They don't want to get out there and dig in the soil with a shovel. That's the reality of the next coming generations. And that is ag tech. And it's happening fantastically on the mainland. California and the Midwest United States, literally billions of dollars are being invested into this industry. It's the last industry standing that has not been yet disrupted by technology. Everybody else, media, as you know, in media, of course, all the other industries have been disrupted by technology, and it's been transformative. But agriculture, because of its very long time frame and high cost of access to land and lots of other problems, agriculture is the last industry to be disrupted by technology.
So what's happening? The secret sauce? Yeah. What kind of technology and how does it incentivize young people? This is really a central question. And what can you do? What can Sitar do about developing, providing that technology? What can the state of Hawaii do?
Right. Well, we believe the best approach to this, which is not an immediate and simple fix, is first to build the ecosystem. And what we mean by the ecosystem are all the players that have a hand or touch the food system need to be engaged in solving this huge structural problem. It's across everything. UHERO has done a very nice job compiling the data and reviewing the history of Hawaii agriculture. And basically, since the beginning of the decline in the plantation era, in the plantation era, agriculture was 50% of Hawaii's GDP. Half of our GDP was agriculture. Well, that was 40 years ago. And as the plantation industry, lost its mojo and steadily declined, the percentage of agriculture in the state GDP has gone from about 50%. It's now at like 0.3% of the state economy. It's nothing. It's insignificant. And yet it's our food. It's very significant. And we believe that trend needs to be reversed. It's about food security. If all of our food is coming in on the Matson boats and something disrupts that, oh my God, I think, somebody had said we've got 3 days of food supply in storage on an island. And if whatever, a war with China or whatever, the food supply gets disrupted, what are we going to do? Right? So it's about food security, but it's also about, what kind of place is this? Where do we want to live? Do we want to be in a place where we're completely dependent on imported foods? And there was a recent survey done by, I think it was the Hawaii Ag Foundation. They interviewed a bunch of tourists in Waikiki, and the tourists told them, we would pay more money in the restaurants to be aware that we were eating locally produced food. They're saying they would pay a premium to know that they were eating local food.
Yeah, so the problem is that the restaurants are going out of business. And,
that's a whole nother problem. That's not something we're working on, though. That's another problem. Yeah, there's a lot of problems. But, Richard Ha is a buddy of mine. And in fact, the conference, you asked who was at the conference. He was our leadoff speaker at our last conference and gave a beautiful address on the history of innovation in Hawaii agriculture. Everything from the sugar plantation through the introduction of macadamia nut, shrimp broodstock, algae farms, all that stuff. And he and I wrote that article together. But it turned out, based on survey of who attended, it was the most popular lecture at the whole conference.
Sure. Now let's talk about Thrive. It's not so easy to pick up the phone, and develop a collaboration with a like-minded organization on the mainland. I'm sure you had to put plenty of time into finding one and fashioning an arrangement with them. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. Thrive is the brand name for a group called SVG Ventures, and they're Silicon Valley based. And if you check them out on the web, svgventures.com, they are, by reputation, the largest ag tech investment fund. They work with over 1,000 companies around the world. They just closed I think it's their fourth fund, $75 million for investing in ag tech. They run accelerators in Canada, in Silicon Valley, in Australia, in Brazil. So they're really the leader in this space of connecting together startup companies with the ag industry. And so we did our conference last June, and everybody who attended opinioned it was a great success. It was really fantastic. Some people said, I was told this by some of the folks from Honolulu that were attending a conference. They said it was the networking event of the year in this space, because all the heavyweights were there, politicians, landowners, investors, policymakers. And we had a great show, and word spread. Wow, these guys are doing something really cool, really unique over in Hawaii. What's happening? And we reached out to the Thrive folks and mentioned it to them. And they did they're a VC firm, so they know how to do due diligence. And they went through it, and they said, "Wow, these guys are pretty exciting." And after a bunch of conversation and so forth, and a detailed back and forth with documents, we ended up signing an agreement to co-produce our conference on AgTech in Hawaii. So they will be our partners for the next 3 years in producing this event. And these are the big boys. This is really, really special for Hawaii, because we have a group here that is completely plugged in globally with ag tech and everything that's happening in that space.
So
very exciting.
That means that they will make investments in Hawaii entrepreneurs. I call it food entrepreneurs.
Yes.
Query. I mean, when we talk about the brood stock and the success of that project, of that venture, we're talking about 20 years ago. And the question is, things have changed. Agriculture has changed. The world supply of food and things like broodstock and the high-tech aspect of that's changed. So query, do you think that Hawaii can do it again? That Hawaii can invent something like the broodstock with investment from Thrive and make money in the same way?
I do think that that's possible, Jay. And I was the heart and soul of the broodstock development. And while you said it was 20 years ago, today, the shrimp broodstock companies in Hawaii, over on Kauai, on Molokai, in Kona, they're exporting all the shrimp they can pack into boxes. Sales for the broodstock industry from Hawaii will probably approach $40 million this year. So it's a thriving industry today, the shrimp broodstock. So that's what we want to do. We want to build something that's sustainable. Mm-hmm. And, as I look across this ag tech space, I have the same enthusiasm and excitement for this component that I had when we first developed the SPF shrimp back in the 90s.
We could never tell that, Jim. We could never tell. So who has to
I'm controlling myself,
Who has to do this? I mean, you have to do it. Obviously, you've been through the process, and the people around you, Jason Ueki, your co-founder, I suppose, of the conference, and the people in Thrive, and and the investors who would come through Thrive and put money into Hawaii, food venture capitalism, if you will. But the question is, who else holds the magic? Who holds the magic recipe here? Is it the legislature? Is it the science at UH? Is it SITAR? Who has to lead the parade?
Well, we like to talk about it being the solution coming from building the ecosystem. So all those players that you mentioned all have a hand in this. We need all of those folks to say, yeah, this is a good idea, and we support it. And that's the challenge, is because building an ecosystem is not easy. You don't put your energy into one thing and just hope that that's be successful. You have to convince everybody that touches this industry, hey, here's the way forward. And so that's what we're working on. We're working on ecosystem building, but all those groups that you mentioned will have a hand in it. And who will be the stars of this? It's the young people, the entrepreneurs who take the risk and see the challenge and see the excitement of what happens when you build a brand new company to do something that no one's done before. I did that. I love it. It's fantastic.
Talk to me, Jim. Let's make me a young entrepreneur. It's a long way, but I can relate to that.
Okay.
Talk to me and tell me why I should spend my time, commit my career, my training, my research time, and so forth, and my money, to this becoming part of this ecosystem you talk about. Why should I do that? Because frankly, a lot of people have considered and rejected that notion, and we have to bring them back, don't we?
Yes, absolutely. In the ag tech space, first of all, as you said earlier, almost all of Hawaii's food is imported, even though we have a tremendous legacy in agriculture. Hawaii was an agricultural state for 150 years. And so that legacy is something to be proud of, and it's a foundation on which we can rise up. But new agriculture is very much driven by technology. It's not just people out digging in the dirt with shovels. That doesn't fly. That doesn't make enough money. We want to create businesses and jobs and opportunities so these young entrepreneurs make a bunch of money. That's the goal, make a bunch of money. And look, AgTech got $20 billion in investments in 2021. It's huge.
Nationwide or worldwide?
That's worldwide. It's huge. It's a huge industry. And we know that Hawaii needs the food. The tourists want to eat local food. Just yesterday in the Sunday newspaper, there was an op-ed from the food hubs, how desperate they are for support. And it turns out they can't get enough fresh food into the food hubs because the farmers aren't producing enough. Why? They're not making money. So we have to figure out ways, how do farmers make more money? But I'm going to tell you, it's not using the old methods. It's not going to cut it, because they've been trying and trying and trying. And, the mom and pop approach is you just work harder. Oh, I'm not working hard enough. I got to work 10 hours. No, I got to work 12 hours. That's not going to cut it. You have to work smarter, and smarter means introduction of technology.
Give me an example, will you, of the technology we're talking about? I mean, for example, what comes to my mind is and it's all the rage, all the fashion right now, it's AI. It's solving problems, technologically, and solving problems in terms of generating text and getting the word out. So
Yes.
query, what kind of technology would change the landscape, if you will, to attract young farmers again?
Yes. Okay. So to start with the AI one, because that's a great area that's exploding right now. In the past, when farmers farmed, they would walk through their farm and it wasn't that big, and they would have almost a relationship with all of their plants that they were growing. And they knew what was happening in every single plant. They'd walk through, they'd look at it, they'd handle it, they'd touch it, they'd smell it. Well, in modern times, that has been lost, because of machinery, the mechanization of agriculture, the farmers driving a bulldozer plow, whatever. They've lost touch with the immediacy of agriculture, and scale has done that too. Well, you introduce AI and monitoring, Internet of Things monitors into agriculture, and all of a sudden, using computers, the farmer again is in touch with every single plant on his farm, even if it's a 100-acre farm. He can know what every single plant is doing on a real-time continuous basis. And AI will give him advice on, oh, this plant is weak. It looks like it's suffering from an iron deficiency. You should go spray some iron on it. Or, oh, this one's infested with a lace bug on your avocado tree and you need to spray it or cut that tree down or whatever. So AI is an amazing tool, and it's now being introduced into agriculture and will have tremendous implications. But, people to use that, they need to understand how to use computers and how to be, they have to be tech savvy.
Well, they have to know about drones too. Isn't what you're describing is it's hand in glove with drones, isn't it?
Absolutely. Drones are a big part of agriculture today because, they can fly out over the field of crops and look at, they can fly low and they can take a picture of every single plant in the farm and do some kind of machine learning AI analysis of it. And, oh, this section is not doing so good. It might need more fertilizer, turn up the water, whatever. So that's definitely a big part of it. And, the people that understand how to do that are going to be, tech savvy, but sympathetic to agriculture, wanting to work in agriculture. So they kind of are going to be hybrid folks. They have to have skill sets on both sides.
Well, one thing that strikes me is, and you're going to know more about this, but you called it a hub a minute ago, a food hub. And it's a matter of consolidating supply lines. It's a matter of making sure that the industry, whatever it is, in whatever crop we're talking about, can consistently supply quality produce, to the market, so that when the market, the restaurants, the food stores, they want to have a predictable supply, they can get it. And I don't think we've achieved that yet. Maybe you can tell me different. But I think that technology could organize collaborations like a hub or whatever that means, so that there's a technological coming together where we know what's in the market, we know how the farmers are producing, and we know how to store it and distribute it. This means like a co-op, I think, or some kind of organization which would take the burden off the individual farmer to market his produce. How right or wrong am I about that? And what do you think about the importance of that?
You're spot on, right, Jay? And that is a big problem. There's a place where the legislature can start to reach into this because there's a need for infrastructure, where food systems get consolidated. I would say, Hawaii needs a strategic plan for food and food systems and agriculture that doesn't currently exist, to my knowledge. Maybe it's sitting on somebody's shelf, but I haven't seen it. And I would say that strategic plan, front and center, should have ag tech in it. This is a way, Hawaii has been talking for years, the whole HTDC purpose is to create tech jobs that have higher paying salaries. And how do we do that? And I think they had a goal of 80 by 80 or something, where $80,000 a year, and they would have 80,000 jobs like that. Well, ag tech can be that. Ag tech, these startup entrepreneur types who understand both tech and agriculture, sort of have their feet in both fields. Those guys are going to make really good money. That's, and that's what we're trying to create. We're trying to create high high-paying jobs. So these guys that run these farms are making enough money to, attract others and keep going and expand and all that. That's the challenge. But, I talked about building the ecosystem. Hawaii has some really interesting ecosystem players, but ag tech isn't part of it yet. And that is, Blue Startups is a tech hub. Chinoa's done a fantastic job with that. And their conference, East Meets West, is coming up. We'll participate in it. She's recommended one of her entrepreneurs to be pitching at our next event. And so we're trying to work together with the ecosystem. Elemental Accelerator in clean tech and climate tech is doing a fantastic job, and we're working with them to share in what do we need and how do we grow this space effectively. So those are some of the ecosystem players.
You describe an ecosystem in which the players make money. Richard Ha, the farmer will farm if the farmer makes money.
Yes.
But, I think there's another element here. I want to bounce it off you, and that's this. The people in the legislature don't necessarily make money by encouraging the farming. They do it because they ran on that platform, or they discovered later that they should be supporting agritech. The other aspect is the media, because in order to have a state of 1.4 million people all adopt local produce, you can't get up in the morning and not talk about it. It has to be everywhere. It has to saturate the public consciousness. And I suggest to you, the media doesn't necessarily make money on an eleemosynary, charitable motivation like that. The media could, without making any money, the media could come out and say, as we do, hey, you guys got to get on the bandwagon here. It's not a question of returning to the old agriculture. It's not a question of even jobs or entrepreneurial success. It's a question of eating. And we really can't afford to take that risk, because one day there'll be extreme weather, or as you say, the Matson ships won't operate for any length of time, and we will all be very hungry. And it will show how vulnerable we are. Therefore, the media and the legislature, people in the legislature, have got to get on the bandwagon here. They won't necessarily make money, but they do it for the sake of the community. How do we get that to operate?
Well, I think what you're doing, Jay, is a piece of it, and you're absolutely correct. We have to have more discussion, more conversation about this, and this brings me back to the purpose of our conference is to introduce the state of the art of what's happening in this space in other places. We have speakers from Singapore, from Thailand, from Europe, from California, from the East Coast, that are experts in various components of this ag tech space, and they're all coming together to Hawaii. They want to help us. Nobody's making money on this. These speakers at the conference, and they want to help us sort of resurrect the ag industry in Hawaii. It's really been on this downward trajectory now for 40 years, and something needs to be done. And I believe it needs to be disrupted. We need to introduce technology. The traditionalists, we get a lot of pushback. Yeah, we're not interested in that, and we want it to be traditional style, and that's all nice and everything. That's all great, but none of the farmers are making money. You can ask them all. They don't make any money. And in every other industry, the introduction of technology has transformed the industry into a more modern, profitable space. And that's what we want. And it can happen in ag too.
So you're operating out of, Hilo? And
yes, sir.
The Big Island, of course. And Big Island is, notable for agriculture, was and is notable for agriculture. And I'd like to know why you're on the Big Island. I mean, couldn't you have greater leverage say on Oahu or some other Maui or Kauai in agriculture? Is there something special, some kind of special sauce? I've always felt that the Big Island had something special in the water that it somehow excites people into technology. And it seems to me that it's more than just the agriculture. As you say, it's an ecosystem, and I would include in that ecosystem the kind of thing we were talking about a minute ago, developing database systems, developing co-op systems and hub systems, where somebody else gets in there, they take a piece of the pie, but it's well worth it to the farming community because they don't have to market the marketing's done for them. That's not necessarily something that Sitar would do. It's not something legislature would do. But somebody has got to do that. I personally think that's a key factor here in the future. So query, is that happening on the Big Island? Does the Big Island have the ability to do non-agricultural technology? In other words, technology that supports the agriculture community, but it isn't agricultural technology.
Yeah, well, Big Island does have some interesting stuff going on. And you mentioned Hilo, and this is Merry Monarch Week. Monday morning, this is Merry Monarch Week, which is a huge thing here in Hilo. Absolutely transforms the town into a place of hula dancers and musicians wandering around and hanging out in the restaurants and bars and everything. And it really is a fantastic, unique experience. It's one of the treasures of living in Hilo, I must say. Anyways, Hawaii Island has the most land, the most resources, the most farms. We have some tremendous institutions on this island: Hilo, Hawaii Community College, PBARC, which is the Pacific Basin Agricultural Research Center. It's funded by USDA. It's a huge research station in Hilo. Then over in Kona, we've got the Natural Energy Lab. Of course, we have all the astronomy stuff, which brings a lot of tech people into Hilo. So we've got all the elements needed, the essential elements, but the actual impetus and the tech development needs to happen. And that's what we're trying to do by convening these conferences, these ag tech conferences. The first one we did was in Hilo because that's where it all belongs, and that's a fantastic thing. I'll tell you, we have an initiative that's developing. We signed an agreement with the FTZ, the Foreign Trade Zone, and we want to develop an ag tech hub on their site in Hilo. It will be called Germinate. And right now in the ledge, we have a CIP request to the ledge for monies to build the Germinate facility on the FTZ site in Hilo. And it seems to be moving through. So we're still, with the crossing over and it's never done until it's done. You don't know with our ledge, but it's still alive and it's crossed over both times. And so we're very optimistic about that. So that's a whole nother initiative we have that's Hilo based and is very complementary to what we're doing with the conference. The conference is about intellectual property, venture capital, what's happening in the world, and bringing that to Hawaii. And then the Hilo Hub is for working with the farmers and the students and demonstrating the technology, for real, where you can go in there and sort of kick the tires and see what it is. And that'll be the place where workforce development can happen. And we see these two projects, the conference and Germinate, as sort of the bookends of how do we develop ag tech in Hawaii. So I'm really excited about Germinate also.
Yeah, there's much more to talk about, Jim, but we're out of time. I would like to talk to you about how you bring in investors and how Thrive brings in investors and what do you want to call it, the environment is for investment. I recall one situation where a fellow who'd made a lot of money in Silicon Valley, representative, a fellow who'd made a lot of money in Silicon Valley in technology, came around to Hawaii. He attended one of our luncheon programs on agriculture, and he said, my group and I would like to invest in agriculture. Can you, introduce me to some people? Which we did. This is 10 years plus ago.
Mhm.
And then we found that he was also talking to people in the hospitality industry. So weeks and months later, he gave me his final decision. He said his group, which was loaded, was going to invest in hospitality. I said, gee whiz, man, don't you understand how important this is to Hawaii? Hospitality ain't the same thing, really. So in closing, let me ask you, Jim, what do you say to that guy? What do you say to a guy who's, on the knife edge between investing in hospitality versus investing in Hawaii agritech and agriculture?
Yeah, well, I think that 10 years is a long time in this space, and the ag tech ecosystem and sector is super dynamic. And if he was aware of some of the stuff that was happening up in California and in the Midwestern United States in terms of the innovation and technology that's being rolled out, I think Hawaii Ag Tech has great opportunity. And I will say, from an investor standpoint, you invest in a Hawaii operation, build some IP in that, and that's now a global, that's the export Hawaii can have, not an individual product, Mac Nuts, Kona Coffee. Those are all great. But IP is the export we should be working on. And we develop the technology here and we sell it. Half of the world is the global south. There's 500 million small farms. If we develop that ag tech technology here in Hawaii, we can sell it to those 500 million farms. And that number is something that gets VCs sitting up because they like that big market number. Things can scale when you have 500 million customers. Yeah.
Jim Wyban, a guy who is so dedicated to agriculture in Hawaii. Thank you, and I wish you well in this summit that you're having in September and all your other activities. I see you as an important element in the development of the industry. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jay. See you.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.